5,
4, 2, 1, 0. Ignition.
For generations, Americans have looked up, their sights not just locked on the stars in the sky, but flying toward them and beyond.
And it has cleared the tower.
The rumbling and stuff starts when the solid rocket boosters, when the main engines ignite.
Charlie Bolden took flight 4 times,
Just shaking and rattling all over the place.
totaling 28 days in space.
Discovery, go for Hubble release.
But for Bolden, no mission compared to the one he'd face a few years later, serving as the first black NASA administrator, the 12th leader of NASA. His friend and fellow former astronaut, Senator Bill Nelson,
And thus, in 2 crews,
is in line to be the 14th pending Senate confirmation. Have you given him any advice?
I have no advice to give him.
Bolden says Nelson is well qualified for the job, which requires balancing science, space, and politics.
Very simply put, the administrator's job is to provide top cover for the 18,000 plus employees in the agency, and let them do their work.
Funded by Congress, it takes money and countless thousands of engineers, scientists, and other support staff to make the missions a reality. Bolden says the administrator's job is to help staff keep pace.
Much easier said than done.
Change is inevitable. Appointed by President Obama, it was Bolden's task to oversee President Bush's directive to end the shuttle program.
There was no question that we needed to phase the shuttle out. I had been a proponent of that a long time ago, because I really believe that if we are going to go back to the moon and on to Mars, shuttle was not the right vehicle for that.
And the moon and Mars and beyond are for NASA now, not just ideas, but missions in motion.
Today, we're one step closer to launching our astronauts from U.S. soil on American spacecraft and ending the nation's sole reliance on Russia by 2017.
This began commercial space services. SpaceX is among the private companies leading missions returning Americans to space and one day Mars.
I went from being the healthy skeptic to being I'm probably the #1 cheerleader.
It's a new chapter with new challenges and successes that will be carried on from one administrator.
But I'll tell you this, the vision now is as bright as it's ever been. We are one step by one step accomplishing what we need to do as a nation to lead again in space, and it's not just rhetoric.
To the next.
3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. And we have liftoff.
Real quick, do you typically go by Charles or Charlie?
Charlie.
Charlie?
I will respond to either, but most of my friends nowadays, I've been Charlie since I went to the Naval Academy. I was Charles growing up, and then I got to the Naval Academy, and all my friends changed my name. So I didn't fight it.
As we kind of dive in here, speaking of friends, one of your good friends is Senator Bill Nelson, fellow astronaut. He is about to go through, and crew member. He's about to go through a process that you know well. Have you given him any advice?
I have no advice to give him because he was actually on my confirmation committee. He was the chairman of the Senate subcommittee on space science and technology, and was the co-chair of the full committee, not co-chair, but the one of the sub-chairs of the full committee when I had my confirmation hearing. So he's seen this several times.
And he's got a dynamic aspect because of his NASA experience, but also his political experience. And he says he's a firm believer that, a politician shouldn't be running NASA. How do you define the role of NASA administrator? Because there is a bit of science, but politics.
No, simplistically put, the way I approach the job is the administrator is the liaison between the agency and the president. People like to use the term White House. The White House is a building, and the administrator is nominated by the president to carry out to the best possible the direction that he desires the agency to go. And so I think it's very important for the administrator to be that single belly button that the president can go to with questions or complaints about the direction that the agency's heading. So very simply put, the administrator's job is to provide top cover for the 18,000 plus employees in the agency, and let them do their work while the the administrator takes care of the up and out business of Congress, the White House, and the American public, and our international and commercial partners, to be quite honest. So it's expanded quite a bit, particularly during my tenure in the Obama administration, as we reached out under the direction of the president to expand the number of non-traditional partners we had, and also to facilitate the success of commercial companies as partners with NASA.
Easier said than done?
Much easier said than done. And it's very difficult because although, you're nominated by the president and the president is your boss, you get all kinds of guidance from people who want to speak for the president. And so I think it's really the one advantage that Bill will have that I did not have is he is a close personal friend of President Biden's. He served with him in the Senate, and while he and I both agree that ideally you should not have a politician as the NASA administrator, in this particular case, as it did with Jim Bridenstine, he'll have the ability to go directly to the president and get direction firsthand, even with a space council, that the Biden administration has announced that they will maintain. Still, the prerogative of the NASA administrator is to go directly to the president, the person that nominated him, and writes his fitness report, if you will, as a military person.
You were leading NASA at some pivotal times.
Have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff.
Notably, the end of the shuttle program when President George W. Bush announced the gradual shutdown of it, and then it was up to you to oversee that. What were some of those moments like, leading some of those projects? There was also a lot of concern at that time too that you had to juggle, especially here on the Space Coast.
Well, for me, because I had grown up, so to speak, in NASA at the Johnson Space Center, it was the whole period, the whole 7.5 years was emotional. It was an emotional roller coaster. There was no question that we needed to phase the shuttle out. I had been a proponent of that a long time ago, because I really believe that if we are going to go back to the moon and on to Mars, shuttle was not the right vehicle for that. It wasn't built for that. It was to be a low Earth orbiting transport vehicle for people and things. Many of the people who had been in on its design, I think much to their chagrin, or much to my pain, they tried to come back and say, no, shuttle can do everything. We can fly different variants and do other kinds of things, and we can get to the moon and we can send people on to Mars. The problem with shuttle was its incredible cost for the infrastructure, and the fact that NASA was trying to run an airline at the same time they were trying to be an exploration organization. But although emotionally difficult, there was no policy question about the fact that shuttle should be phased out. So, I dealt with the emotion, but took care of the policy part of it. One that was more difficult was the termination of Constellation. And while I believe that was the correct thing to do, my opposition was to believe it or not, it was very simply, it was to the use of the word terminate in the Constellation program, because although I'm not an attorney or anybody, that word brings with it all kinds of heartache in terms of lawsuits and legal proceedings and penalties and prices that NASA would have to pay down the line in perpetuity, probably, by terminating the program, as opposed to revising it or going back and looking at it and modifying it to better suit the Obama administration's desire to continue to explore. I think one of the early problems was the fact that, to my knowledge, there were two people in the world who really thought about going to Mars, and that was President Obama and me. I was chastised quite handily by almost everyone for even mentioning Mars, people in the administration, because the rest of the administration wasn't ready at the time to start talking about Mars. They were really focused on two things. One was the Affordable Health Care Plan, which dominated everything in the first 2 years, but also in the arena of space was bringing on commercial space as the savior of all things. And while I was a firm believer, let me put it this way, I was a healthy skeptic about the capabilities of commercial space.
And liftoff.
So now when you see what SpaceX, for example, is doing now, what are your thoughts on commercial?
I went from being the healthy skeptic to being I'm probably the #1 cheerleader. And, I believe that it's absolutely essential for us to continue to facilitate the success of the commercial entities in order to shore up the infrastructure in low Earth orbit that we need if NASA and our international partners are going to be successful in deep space exploration back to the moon and on to Mars. NASA can't handle low Earth orbit and moon and Mars. So we've got to be able to very judiciously hand over the oversight and operation of low Earth orbit infrastructure to the commercial sector.
Is that from a cost and or operational and talent perspective?
I think it's from a practical perspective. Even the United States doesn't have enough money or is not going to put enough money into the NASA budget to do both. And so by facilitating the success of the commercial sector and allowing them to provide transportation to and from low Earth orbit, as well as platforms in LEO that the transportation companies can go to, that facilitates the success of that area. One of the things that I've always complained about, however, is that there are far too many transportation providers, far too many launch providers. What we need is some of those launch providers to convert to on-orbit platform providers, small space stations, human-rated and not, some that are standalone, autonomous, where we do things like microgravity, materials processing, protein crystal growth, the kinds of things that the only thing you need a human for is just to put the experiment in place, turn it on, and leave. There's a company out of Israel right now that's called Space Pharma. Space Pharma does a number of experiments in biomedical research, in protein crystal growth, and you name it, and the astronaut is not required at all. They launch on SpaceX vehicles and they go to the International Space Station. The astronaut puts it in its appropriate place on station, and then Space Pharma monitors it and runs it from their headquarters outside of Tel Aviv. And we should have more platforms like that.
So as you talk about a lot of these efforts, and again, going back to the moon and Mars, and we've been eyeing Mars for some time. Wasn't it like in the 1960s that Russians kind of put the first lander on Mars?
Well, if you look at the U.S., we have been exploring Mars now for in excess of 50 years, and all of them have been in preparation for sending humans there.
So looking at those missions, looking at Mars and the moon, what's the role of NASA Administrator? How hands-on is an administrator, and how much of it is engineers, mid-level managers kind of rowing the boat, if you will?
The people rowing the boat are the worker bees. Everybody below the rank of or below the office of the administrator, from your associate administrators who run the 4 mission directorates, down to the center directors and the engineers who work for them. Those are the people that row the boat. The administrator is sort of like the coxswain, if you want to put it in rowing terms. He's the person, or she is the person that's setting the pace, calling stroke, and looking around at the other ships and the other boats in the water and deciding what pace should we row and everything else in order to stay ahead. And so I think that's one of the principal jobs of the administrator. And if you want to put it into a racing analogy, with shells and the like, our international partners are the other shells in the water, on the Potomac River here. And while the spirit of competition, we want to win, we also want to see them do well, because as they do better, we do better. If you want to have a really great team that continues to go to higher and higher levels of performance, then you need somebody who pushes you. Mm-hmm. You need partners and competitors, and or we coin all kinds of phrases. Sometimes I call them compartners or part competitors or something. I don't know. You can make some kind of name that says your partners are also your competitors, because today the competition is not one nation against another nation or one company against another company. It's a competition of ideas. People talk about diversity and inclusion all the time, and I think the reason that we struggle so with it, and a lot of people don't agree with it, is because they fail to recognize the fact that the best performing organizations are organizations that have diversity of thought and ideas and input. And the more NASA can encourage our international partners and our commercial partners to come up with ideas that differ from ours, and sometimes contest ours and challenge ours, the better we're going to be. Everything that we did during my administration, the final result was not NASA's original idea. In almost every case, it was either some compromise that we reached with an international partner on a way we were going to do a payload or a satellite or something, or a compromise with our commercial partners.
Well, spanning off of the relations there, and you also spoke about the importance of race and inclusion and diversity. I believe in 2016 you gave an interview to NPR where you spoke about being a black man and the challenges even getting into the Naval Academy, and you wouldn't be where you are today had you not gotten into the Naval Academy. And then when you came on board as NASA Administrator, you talked about one of the main goals, trying to encourage kids to get into science and math. How important is that as a NASA Administrator to being able, here on the Space Coast, we consider that, where elementary and middle school, these kids see the science day in and day out with the rocket launches in their backyard. How important is that as an administrator to take that approach, to preach about inclusion, diversity, and getting kids inspired in the mission?
I think humility taken into consideration, as humble as you want to be as the NASA Administrator, the unfortunate or fortunate fact is you're the voice and face of the agency. So you're the voice and face of the most respected technological organization on the planet, to be quite honest. And I think that as I do with my work in the Marine Corps, as President Biden's trying to do now, as President Obama tried to do, it has to come from the top. Military leaders today, as we try to stamp out racism and extremism in the military, if the service chief isn't the person that's the champion for diversity and inclusion, it doesn't get done. And I think people are starting to realize that more and more. When the leader doesn't believe in it, or the leader opposes it, it doesn't happen. And so I think it's critical for the NASA Administrator to be the diversity champion for the agency. I actually call myself the diversity champion, and everybody in the agency and all of our partners, international and commercial, they knew that, and they knew it was really important to me. One of the things that makes me feel really good about Senator Nelson is that, as long as I've known him, he's demonstrated his commitment to diversity and inclusion. If you walk in his office when he was a senator or a congressman, he always tried to have folk who represented NASA in the offices, interns and the like, and frequently they were women or people of color. Among his chief advisors were always women and people of color, and that was a consistent thing you saw. I think he will be a champion for diversity and inclusion. And people frequently, some of our detractors used to complain about the fact that NASA was so involved in diversity and inclusion efforts, or that we were reaching out to expand the number of international partners to what we call non-traditional partners. People found, particularly people on the right, tended to use that as a bludgeon to go against President Obama. that he was asking NASA to do things that's not NASA's business. Well, it is NASA's business in the 1958 Space Act that established NASA. It established education of the masses as one of its principal duties and responsibilities. And President Kennedy, and even in his speech about going to the moon, the part that people missed was how we were going to use science and exploration of space to bring people together. So, people tend to forget that when they look at what NASA and the NASA Administrator are doing.
Last couple quick questions for you, talking about the challenges.
Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Go with throttle up.
Roger, go with throttle up.
1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles. Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction.
Tail end of what was a relatively flawless mission, scientific mission, 16 days in orbit. What we're seeing here is very ominous indeed. These are
Challenger, Columbia. Sometimes administrators also have to look at the risks and rewards, as we've lost men and women on various missions. How does an administrator approach some of those challenges of tragedy, if you will?
I was very fortunate in that we did not have a vehicle loss during my tenure, but I had lived through Challenger, because Challenger occurred 10 days after I came back, after Senator Nelson and I came back from our first flight in space aboard Columbia. And then when we lost Columbia in 2003, February 1st, that was, both accidents were very personal because they involved friends or people that we knew pretty well and that we respected a lot. But I think the big thing is for the administrator to step forward and sort of be a caregiver, to be a compassionate person, to help everyone in the organization understand that loss of members of the family is not only something that may happen, but in all likelihood, because we're in risky business, will happen, and we have to be prepared to deal with that when it does occur. I think the more the administrator can talk to the organization about the risks involved in what we do and help prepare the team for eventual loss, but let them know that because what we do is bigger than us, that we'll be able to endure and we'll be able to press on even in the face of loss. And I think administrators before me did it very well.
Let me ask Charlie, the astronaut, that thought, you're in the back room starting to suit up, like, where does it start to sink in? Is it, walking down the ramp to get into the van? Is it on the drive over? Where is it that it sinks in like, all right, I'm loaded up to quite a bit of fuel and I'm about to take a ride?
Well, since you asked me about Charlie the astronaut and not astronauts in general, I'll speak for Charlie the astronaut. It never does. That thought never sank in 4 flights. What sinks in really strongly as you approach the flight, but particularly once you get strapped in and you start looking around, is, man, there's a lot of stuff here, and I just want to make sure I do everything properly. I don't want to do anything that's going to put my crew in jeopardy. And you realize whether you're the commander or the pilot or a mission specialist, I've got a job to do, and I need to do it well for us to safely conduct this mission and get everybody back home. And that was particularly number one on my mind the 2 times that I flew as a commander of a mission. The fact that it was my job to get my crew and my vehicle into space and back home safely. And if I did that, everything else, nothing else mattered.
So if you're talking to a group of 5th graders in Brevard County and they're asking you, what is it like at launch? Yeah. How do you describe it? I mean, I imagine you kind of, flat back strapped in. Yeah. Like, at what point do you start to feel some rumbles or something? Or
let me tell you, 5th graders ask that question a lot too, and they like to ask, were you afraid? And I tell them, you know, I don't ever remember being afraid. I was apprehensive. And then I have to explain what that big word means. And I explained that apprehensive means I was concerned that I do the right things. You know, I wanted to make sure that I remembered all of my procedures, that I knew where to look if something happened, and that I would be able to help protect my crew. And fifth graders can understand that. But when they ask you, what's it like? I mean, the rumbling and stuff starts when the solid rocket boosters, well, when the main engines ignite with shuttle, as you may remember, you know, the vehicle, because the main engines were kind of canted for ascent, the vehicle does what we call a twang. It really tilts because it's held up by those 8 bolts that hold the two solid rocket boosters to the launch pad. And so it did this twang. It went for a while and bong, pound, kind of came back. And that took about 7 or 8 seconds, and it was perfectly timed such that when you got back to vertical, the solid rocket boosters ignited, and man, the twang turned into the just incredible vibration that, as good as the simulators were, they could never simulate the frequency of the vibration, and you're just shaking and rattling all over the place, and you can feel yourself sink back in your seat ever so gently. And that begins the first of a number of dynamic changes for the 8.5 minutes that you're going to space. You know, once the solid separated, it gets really quiet and very, very smooth. So you went from all this shaking and rattling on the solids to just a nice smooth ride, like you're in a big limousine on the newest superhighway. And as you get to the end of the acceleration part of the launch, about the 7-minute, 45-second point, you can actually tell the main engines are starting to throttle down as the pressure on your chest builds, because the acceleration on the vehicle is going up as it gets lighter and lighter as it gets rid of fuel. But you're going faster and faster, and you get to about, you can feel about 3 Gs across your chest. I like to tell kids that it's like having a couple of gorillas sitting in your chest. But you just, you know, you go ahead and take deep breaths and exhale and inhale, and in about 45 seconds, it's all over, and you pop up in your seat, because now you have nothing pushing you along, and you're in microgravity and you're floating. So gravity has been overcome. It's still there, but it's been overcome by the speed of the vehicle that's creating this centrifugal force that's fighting against gravity, and you're stuck in the middle floating.
Is it the same level of adrenaline on re-entry?
It's different on re-entry. I mean, the ascent starts immediately, because when the 3 main engines ignited on shuttle, and I imagine it's the same on Soyuz or anything, you literally hear this explosion. It's just a and they go the vehicle, you know, the main engines light, and you're 200 and some odd feet up in the air, separated from the main engines, but you can hear it going through the superstructure, and you can feel the vehicle kind of rumbling and everything. Coming back to Earth, it's an hour-long evolution. So you do your deorbit burn. That's the first time that you actually sense G again, and it's because this is in the shuttle. The deorbit burn was done with 2 engines that we call orbital maneuvering system engines, and when they ignited, they essentially put you in about a 1G environment. So you literally were pushed back in your seat, because the vehicle was turned around backwards to slow you down, and you could feel this. You could feel the acceleration coming from the orbital maneuvering system engines. And then after that, once they turned off, you were back to floating. Very gentle re-entry for the first half hour until you got to the atmosphere, and then the vehicle began to make these really slow, nice, easy, sweeping turns to burn off energy, to be quite honest, as it heated up coming through the atmosphere. And it was farther and farther down in the atmosphere you came, you could feel the gradual onset of gravity. So it's a much more gradual onset of that kind of physical feeling compared to ascent.
And of course, you're there in the front of the cockpit piloting the shuttle.
Yeah. Ascent, everything starts out right away, and it gets better the farther you go along. You know, it gets more and more peaceful. entry is just the opposite. It starts out incredibly undynamic and peaceful, and by the time you get, you go subsonic. When you go subsonic, about 3 minutes from your touchdown, you're roughly, or you're miles up in the air above the landing site, and you can feel the vehicle kind of dig in as it goes subsonic. You actually get just a little rumble, a very gentle rumble, and then the commander and the pilot start to fly the vehicle, and the next thing you know, you're on the ground. So,
I imagine you like a glider, you come down, wheels touch down at KSC, parachutes come out. You ever kind of take the helmet off and say, that was a hell of a ride?
Every time. You didn't take it off right away, but everybody generally comments. If you did your landing okay, then everybody compliments the commander on a nice landing. So my 2 landings, I got complimented by my crew because I did a pretty good job.
So let me wrap up with this, because I would be amiss if I did not ask a former NASA administrator and astronaut this one question. Is there life out there?
Yeah, let me tell you, I am one who firmly believes that it is unlikely that the creator, whoever you believe the creator is, put this giant universe together and only picked one teeny weeny little planet in the whole universe on which to put life. So I don't have any evidence to prove it, but I, because of my faith and other things, I think there is a very, very good chance that there is life elsewhere in the universe. The problem right now is we don't have the technological capability, the speed with which to go visit other solar systems or even other galaxies, and so we'll have to wait unless they come to us and reveal themselves.
Question everything, believe in anything.
Yep. And I believe it. That's a good philosophy.
Charlie Bolden, I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so very much. I enjoyed it.